Well, happy holidays, real estate fans. It's Alice Lema, broker John L. Scott, here with another episode of the Real Estate Show. So glad you could join us today. We're very lucky to have Dave Arrasmith from Jackson County Tax Assessor again. But this time we're going to be talking about the appeal process. So Dave has been involved in the tax and appraisal world for decades. He's very knowledgeable. He's also very funny. So we'll be welcoming Dave Arrasmith from Jackson County Tax Assessor to the show here in just a quick minute to talk about the property tax appeal process. But in the meantime, while we're waiting, we want to go over all three counties' statistics this week. So let's get started. Jackson County prices year over year are up 1%. The average residential home in Jackson County this week now costing $515,213. The number of sold year over year in Jackson County were down 19% week to week. There were 45 closings on SOMLS in Jackson County's residential markets this week. The number of listings year over year in Jackson County were up 4%. There are now 697 active listings on SOMLS in Jackson County's residential markets. Josephine County prices year over year are down 18% this week. The average residential home in Josephine County now costing $382,923. The number of sold year over year in Josephine County were down 13% this week. There were only 13 closings on SOMLS in Josephine County's residential market. The number of listings year over year in Josephine County were up 17% this week. There were 360 active listings on SOMLS in Josephine County's residential market. The Klamath County market has some interesting statistics this week. The prices year over year in Klamath County were down 15% this week. The average residential home now costing $339,211. The number of sold year over year were up 26% this week. There were 19 closings on SOMLS in Klamath County's residential market. The number of listings were up this week in Klamath County. They were up 21%. There were 300 active listings on SOMLS in Klamath County's residential market this week. So, folks, you can see we're back to having quite a variety in all three counties, between all three counties. You know, last week we had prices up all three counties, which is unusual. It's usually more local and specific than that. But this week, we're back to some volatility. So what that tells us is that the market is still bouncing around on the bottom, trying to make a comeback to prepare for 2025. But at least this week, and probably because it's a holiday week, not quite making it. In the meantime, the numbers show that we still are short listings. So if you can stay in getting your house on the market this winter, maybe now's the time. Call an agent. In the meantime, let's welcome Dave Arrasmith from Jackson County Tax Assessor. Well, welcome, Dave. We're so happy to have you on the show again. Thank you.
Well, it's a pleasure to be back. Thank you.
So you are the Jackson County Tax Assessor for 2 more weeks.
Right on. Yeah, 2 more weeks.
Yep. And one of the things we wanted to have you back to talk about was the appeal process, because a lot of people don't even know that they can appeal their taxes, and it is quite an involved process.
I would believe most taxpayers, property owners, would tend to want to think that it's too hard, too complex, too timely, out of their expertise, and don't want to hire an attorney or an appraiser to carry the load for them. So
Yeah.
they shy away.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's some people think you just, what do they say? You can't argue with City Hall.
I hear that. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so let's say somebody got their tax bill this last October, November, and they feel that it's not correct or not fair. What do they do?
The first, I would recommend first, just visit the assessor's office and um, they can ask to see copies of their records. So you can see, I mean, copies of our file, the records that we have on their property. That's a good place to start, and look for mistakes, simple mistakes. Maybe we have the house as 2,000 square feet and it's really 1,500. Well,
Ah,
or we have we class homes on a scale of 1 to 8, 1 being maybe an outhouse and 8 being a mansion. And if we have their property classed as a mansion, maybe they think it's not, and they want to challenge the classification or the
uh-huh.
or the year built, because older homes may not be as carry as much value as newer homes.
Gotcha, gotcha. So, what about remodeling? Like, is there any conversation available on what a remodel is worth?
Actually, that's very interesting. I hadn't penciled that in as a topic of discussion, but yeah, that's good point. Up until 1997, property tax was the tax rate times real market value. So if someone did a remodel, added a room, maybe put up a fence, maybe did landscaping,
Mm-hmm.
if they did anything that physically wasn't there the year before and now that it's there, that could add to the real market value, the sales price of the house. But in 1997, there was based on a outrage over property tax, and voters put a ballot measure on their own in Oregon to be voted on, a measure 50, and it passed, and it created a new number called maximum assessed,
Uh-huh.
and maximum assessed really became the what the tax rate is applied to get a bill. So here's the thing. Like I was visiting with one lady, and she was upset. She says, I want to put in a fence and maybe some landscaping. And my husband says, we're not going to do it. It's going to raise the taxes. We're not doing it. Forget it. Yeah, we're not going to do that. And she says, it doesn't seem fair. And I said, well, here's the thing. MAV can only be increased if the added value of real market value is in 1 year is $10,000. So if you put in a fence and it's less than $10,000, that will add value to the sales price, the real market value, but that other number, maximum assessed number, it won't change that. That
Oh,
number,
that's interesting.
that number will just go up the normal 3%.
Uh-huh.
So you can add up to $10,000 each year, or I think it's a total of 25,000 over, I don't know, maybe 5 years. So as soon you could do 10,000 the first year, 10,000 the next year, and in the third year maybe do 5,000, keep it under the 25, and then after that 5-year period becomes next year, there'll be a new 5-year period. It'll be the current year plus the next 4. So you could always, in theory, you could build a brand new house as long as you only did less than 25,000 over a 5-year period. It would increase the real market value, but there'd be no maximum assessed value.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. So if you
So
had
that lady said, Dave, I'm running home. I'm not even staying for the rest of the meeting. I'm going to go tell my husband I can put up the fence and it's not going to add property tax.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. That's hilarious. So
Yeah.
theoretically, if you had enough skill, high enough skill level in the construction area, you could do your own house a little bit every year and maybe get it done in 5 years.
I know most people that, I had a guy retire from my office a few years back, 5 or 6 years back, maybe longer now. And I think he basically tried to do that. He did the foundation one year, and then the next year did something different, and then did something different. And even if you don't do the whole thing, if you just get a good part of it done, and keep it under the radar of the maximum assessed value.
And
Yeah.
that's all legal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it is.
Well, I know our listeners are glad they tuned in today.
So if you want to put on a bathroom and say it's going to be a new room addition and it's going to be 15,000, well, do half of it, do under 10 in year one and finish it off in year two.
Yeah, well, that's great. We're getting advice from Dave Arrasmith, the current Jackson County tax assessor. We're going to have to take a quick break, but Dave's going to be with us for the rest of the hour, and we'll have more good advice from Dave Arrasmith, Jackson County tax assessor. We want to say thank you to our sponsors, John L. Scott, Ashland, and Medford, the local Rogue Valley Center. Well, welcome back, Southern Oregon, to the Real Estate Show. We are having a delightful conversation with Jackson County Tax Assessor Dave Arrasmith, and he just started giving us, in the last segment, some hacks, some tax assessment, legal avoidant hacks. Dave, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you. Yeah, I love talking about this job. So
yeah. Well, it's fascinating. It's a fascinating topic, and a lot of us don't know the ins and outs of the property tax situation, especially the appeal process.
I would recommend a property owner just come in and visit with our office and look for mistakes. There's tax court has in numerous cases has tried to explain to the taxpayer that the Oregon income tax and Oregon property tax, the burden of finding errors is different in each one of those. For instance, in income tax, it's up to the person submitting their 1040 or the Oregon 540 personal individual tax return. It's up to them to file it and calculate their tax. They enter their income, they enter their expenses, they look up what the tax is on that on the net income. They write what their taxes due, how much is due, and they write a check and send in they calculate the whole thing and send it in. Now it's up to the government to audit what the taxpayer does. There was like a 3-year period where the state or IRS can audit a return and make changes. So if the state of Oregon doesn't take advantage of that 3-year audit period, if there's any mistakes found after that, it's spilt milk or something. Nothing you can do about it. Property tax is just the opposite. The county calculates the tax, not the taxpayer. So it's up to the courts have ruled, or they've tried to explain to taxpayers while they're in the courtroom, that the county isn't under the present system obligated to audit itself. I mean, we do look for errors, and if we find them, we fix them. But it's really the burden to find the errors or to challenge the values is a court. The tax court has said it's on the taxpayer.
Wow.
If the taxpayer gets a tax bill and sits back and does nothing about it and doesn't appeal it, they can appeal the current year value only, but they can also appeal the past 5 years for not a value error, but a clerical error, something that's
Mm-hmm.
we assessed the wrong person. Well, we can correct that. That's a clerical error. We say there's a building and it's not there. So those are errors that can be corrected over a 5-year period, but after that, it's not correctable. And the courts have said, why did you wait so long to bring it up? And even the court can't do anything about it.
Wow. Wow. That is so interesting. We're talking to Dave Arrasmith, the current Jackson County tax assessor. And we're learning all kinds of things.
So that's like step one. I recommend go into the assessor's office, get copies of all the data we have on the property, and make sure that the property owner agrees with it. If they don't, now you got a discussion.
So get copies of data. That's your first step. Make sure
right.
that it's all correct.
And that's public information. They're entitled to it. It's not it's not something that they should be afraid to ask for.
Okay.
And then if by the December 31st, if they feel the value is high, then it should be, they can and the assessor hasn't agreed to reduce it, then they can appeal to the local board of well, they just changed the name of it. It's now called the Property Value Appeals Board. It was called the Board of Property Tax Appeals. We abbreviated that BOPTA, but now it's Property Value Appeals Board. I guess that abbreviation is PVAB. If you can pronounce that like BOPTA, I don't.
Property Value what?
Appeals Board.
Appeals Board.
So the difference is, the Board of Property Tax means they gave the impression that they were appealing the tax. Well, the board can't do anything about the tax. The tax is based on the value. So the value has to change. The value has to change before the tax can change. So now they call it the Property Value Appeals Board. You know, before 1997, before MAV, that board was called the Board of Equalization.
Was it really?
Yeah, when I started working there, statewide, they called it the Board of Equalization. But when MAV was created in 1997, it threw out equalization. There's no, before 1997, you could have two properties, 2,000 square feet, same, you know, side by side, built by the same builder, same quality and everything. But they should have the same real market value.
Yes.
Property. But they might not have the same maximum assessed value. Maybe one was built in November of 1990 of one year, and the other one was built in January of the next year. Because they were built in different years, they get a different MAV.
Wow.
A different starting MAV. So they could have identical RMV. So before 1997, their tax bill would be the same, but then later, because of MAV, they might be identical in every way, real market value, but MAV could be different. So they're both tax bills would be based on MAV, so there'd be no equalization in the bill.
That is so interesting. And so is that how the laws got changed to our current system?
Right. I went from Board of Equalization to BOPTA, Board of Property Tax Appeals. That was created in 1997. And then this last year, I think, I don't really know the history behind the name change, but I think plenty of people thought it needed to reflect that property owners need to change the value to get a reduction in tax. They couldn't go in and ask for a reduction in tax.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah. So when they go to the board now, if they go to the board, they get a 20-minute hearing, and which isn't very much time. The way that's broken out, there's the first 5 minutes of that 20 minutes is kind of a meet and greet. The property owner sits down in front of the three board members, and maybe they even know each other, and they say, "Hi, Bob. Hi, Jim." You know,
because of the small town.
Yeah, how's the missus? How's the kids? I mean, so there's a 5-minute meet and greet, and then because they're realtors, and they know, usually realtors, the three board members, and they know.
Oh, I was going to ask you how the board members get chosen.
Well, they volunteer.
They do.
Yeah, and generally the same people volunteer every year. I don't know if you ever worked on committees, but volunteers are pretty rare, and they tend to get voted in year after year because nobody else wants to do it, right?
Okay.
So
And the
we
realtors?
what's that?
And the realtors?
Generally, yes.
Okay.
I've seen an appraiser on there, maybe a property manager on there.
Uh-huh.
But
So
they're
they're
usually
definitely in the business and qualified.
yeah, I think those are the only people that generate an interest in wanting to serve on that board. You know, if somebody's just wants to serve on that board and volunteer, and they think they could add to the discussion.
Mm-hmm.
If there's an opening and they don't have a lot of competition for other volunteers, they'd probably they'd be a shoe in. So
Mm-hmm. Well, and after the meet and greet, what's the next step?
well, then the next 5 minutes, the property owner gets to go first. I mean, anytime.
Oh, that's good.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is more like a civil matter, not a criminal matter.
Mm-hmm.
But in a criminal matter, it's the police or the district attorney who's bringing the case against an individual. So that person who's bringing the case goes first in trial. They have to go first. They know the alleged suspect doesn't have to go on trial first, so they're the defendant, and the police is the plaintiff. In a civil suit like a property tax, the plaintiff is the taxpayer and the defendant is the assessor's office. So the plaintiff always goes first. It's just typical of our court system, I think. So the next first 5 minutes is a meet and greet. The next 5 minutes, the property owner gets to lay out their case for a different value. And then in the next 5 minutes, the assessor's office gets to make their case to support or maybe offer a new value. And then in the last 5 minutes, those board members just do miracle work. They have to take off. They've been listening to people give verbal testimony. They've been trying to flip through papers. Maybe they've got a computer screen they're trying to find stuff on. And then the members are dialoguing and they're just juggling a lot of stuff. But in that last 5 minutes.
Well, hey, Southern Oregon, thanks for being with us today on the Real Estate Show. We're talking to Dave Arrasmith, the Jackson County Assessor's Office. A lot of us didn't even know you can appeal your property taxes. Can you just recap some of the data that they're checking between the board and the homeowners so that the conflict can be resolved?
Okay, so when the property owner starts their presentation, they'll quite likely bring in some paperwork, some documents, and they know that this home sold, and they know the sales price, and they know the square footage, and they believe their property is like those three, and they would like a value like those three. That seems reasonable. So they would present that information. So it's a big challenge. Someone might, if they were to hire an appraiser might come in with an appraisal report that's 50 pages long.
Right.
Walk a board through a 3-member board through a 50-page document and try to and have the board even see every page, let alone try to understand all of the math and what's going on, the comparisons. It's a real challenge. So it's best to keep it at that level in the appeal process. Keep it simple. If that kind of intense dialogue back and forth really should go to the next level, and that's Oregon Tax Court. And you can a homeowner can spend all day giving their case. So they can do a much better job of presenting their case at the next level, probably. But if they're good at laying out something really simple and common sense, and that the board can get their mind around and they can wrap around it, that's the best approach. And the same for the county assessor.
So is the county tax assessor at that meeting?
Right. You generally give it to the appraiser that did that particular property.
Okay.
They're the best person to answer questions about what they saw and what the property looks like.
So have you sat in these meetings?
I've as an appraiser, I defended a lot of county appraisals. Also, I showed up at the hearings sometimes and offered a reduced value. I don't always agree. You know, not not every value that's on the tax roll is done by an appraiser that year. The last value could have been 20 years ago, and it's just been trending every year. And maybe that trending took it out of alignment with where it should be. So then if during an appeal, I would do a brand new appraisal on the property and my value was less. I don't try to defend the county's value. I try to defend my new value.
Oh, okay. Well, that seems fair.
Yeah. I know some
Interesting.
property owners say, well, I'm not going to go in because what if they raise my value? Well, the board doesn't have any authority to do that.
Oh, okay. Okay. So they just have the authority to lower the value.
Right. So if I did an analysis, and most of my time there was income property, so I would do a valuation not based on comparable sales, but what an investor would pay for that income stream on an apartment complex or a shopping
Oh, okay.
or something like that. Tell the board I really believe the correct value is higher, but I can't ask for that higher value at this hearing. So my recommendation is that boards simply leave the current tax value as is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and then I'm sure the property owner's disappointed.
Not really. Well, because right now they have to reduce really real market value below MAV to get any
Right.
So I think I mentioned this when I last visited
Yep.
your
Last
show,
time we talked about that.
if they don't reduce we had in 1997 we had 2,200 appeals. So the appeal board met every day from 8 till 5 from February through May.
Wow.
The last few years we've had 40. So the board only meets for about 2 days and they're done. I mean, 20-minute hearings, you can do 3 in an hour. So in 8 hours, you could do 24. In 2 days, you could do 40.
Yeah. Yeah. So is that how it's done? It's all done in just a couple days?
Yeah, well, 20 minutes each. And if we
Yeah.
have 40, figure out how long it would take to do 40 appeals if they each get 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm. And those are done what part of the year?
What a new board is created every year, and then once they hear all the cases, they're dissolved. So they have each board is a very short life. The next board they rehire or find new board members, and they have basically a very short life. And once those appeals are heard, it's over. But I think the last couple of years the appeals started somewhere around March, maybe.
Okay.
The county clerk works as like the secretary for the board. She's the administrative officer for the board. So
Okay.
I say she because it's Chris Walker. But it could be a he. But the county
Chris is great.
The county clerk handles sets up all the meetings and essentially works a schedule that works for them. And also, the hearings can be by phone, so people don't even they don't even have to show up. They could be in Hawaii and on the beach and do their hearing from there.
Wow. Wow. That's great. So what about Zoom? Can you do it by Zoom?
What's that?
Can you do it by Zoom, by video
If
chat?
If the county clerk is set up for it, I'm sure it could be done that way. I don't. I think
that's so current technology.
Yeah, but phone works really well. And if all of their documents that they submit can be they're scanned, and each board member can bring up the documents on their individual computer and see all the documents. So that's the important thing, is to look at the documents. Although it's good it's nice to have a visual with about the person talking, but it can be by phone with submitted documents ahead of time.
So what kind of documents does the homeowner have to provide?
basically anything that will prove their or at least give credibility to the value that they like. If they bought the house, that's perfect. I mean, if they just bought it, that's about all they, that says a lot. That's because that's what we're trying to estimate what a property would sell for. So I don't fight those values. Why would I fight the value of property sold for unless I had reason to believe it was like dad sold the property to the daughter and it came in at about half the value of everything else in the neighborhood. Well, then we can say maybe that wasn't an arm's length transaction, and that could explain why there's such a difference in the value that it's sold for compared to neighboring sales.
So is that what homeowners are basically saying when they come in is there's somebody in my neighborhood that is paying less than and I want that same deal? Is that kind of what's going on?
I do see that, but that's not evidence of value. Because we know equalization doesn't work, isn't out there anymore. The best argument is the real market value, the estimated sales price. That's what the assessor's trying to put on the tax roll, the estimated sales price. So if they think it would sell for less, the taxpayer would make that argument, and then it's kind of a domino effect. If you get the value reduced, at least in the old days, that would reduce the property tax. But I'll give you, this is a fun story. I did an appraisal on on all the hotels in Ashland, and this gentleman came in one year and had an appraisal report. We had like $1 million on a value on that motel, and he had got an appraisal report for a refinance, and it came in at 800,000. Now his MAV was 600,000. So our real market value was 1 million, and our MAV value that he was taxed on was 600,000. He got an appraisal for 800,000, and believing that getting a reduction of a real market value from 1 million to 800,000 would reduce his tax. He wasn't familiar about MAV. He was being taxed on that, which was 600,000.
Oh.
So I looked at his appraisal report. I flipped through it. I checked some math, and I looked at the comps, and I told this gentleman, you know what? I agree with this appraisal. I think our value is too high. I'll go right back to my desk right now, and I'll put 800,000 value on your property based on this appraisal. And he said, well, when do I get my tax refund? I said, well, okay. As Paul Harvey would say, this now for the rest of the story, you're not going to get a refund. He goes, why? You're reducing my value from 1 million to 800,000. I said, because you're being taxed on 600,000. Why would you want to be taxed on 800?
Yeah.
And he caught on really quick. He says, David, don't go, give me that appraisal right now. Don't you go back and change the value, because I might want to sell this place. And I have to sell it. I like the county value.
Oh, that's great. We're talking to Dave Arrasmith, Jackson County Tax Assessor. We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors. Well, welcome back to the Real Estate Show, folks. We're so glad to have you here. And just a quick reminder that this show will be repeated tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. And so you can hear all of Dave Arrowsmith's humor and good advice from Jackson County Tax Assessment Office. Thanks for being here, Dave. It's been a delight.
Well, you're welcome. And I always enjoy your show. So
and we just learned so much. We're really going to miss you from the tax assessor's office when you retire this year. But one of the things we were wanting to touch on was the magistrate as far as tax appeals go. When does that play in?
After going to BOPTA, or they changed, it's not BOPTA anymore, it's Board of Value Appeals Board. That board will issue an order to either sustain the county value, the tax roll value, or to reduce it. So the the property owner can, if they're not satisfied with the board order, they can appeal that board order to Oregon Tax Court. And it has a lower division and an upper division. You appeal to the lower division. If the taxpayer doesn't like this, the decision there, they can appeal it to the upper division, and into the Supreme Court. I think I looked at the county clerk's website, and I think the cost to file a petition with the local board was $51. And at tax court, I think it's about the same. So it's not really expensive. I mean, if you think about it this way, if a person wants to go out and try to hire an appraiser to do a valuation on their property, they might spend a lot more than $100.
Oh, totally.
And so they could go through the appeal process and get a good valuation on their property for a pretty reasonable price, even if they only did it because, I mean, I'm not recommending they do that, but I know some, I've known some who maybe they got a divorce thing going on, they got something going on, IRS, maybe they need a value on their property. And this is one way to get an official value. That
Wow, I never heard that. That's a great idea.
It could be might be a credible evaluation in some other court situation. So you go to appeal to magistrate. Like I said, I think it's still around $50. They did a big price reduction a number of years back from like 200 down to 50. And the advantage to tax court is a property owner can spend as much time as they think they need. They're not limited to 5 minutes, and they can give their report and take as much time as they want. And tax court will allow cross-examination. That's not allowed at the local board.
Oh,
so if I present to the board, the local board, my value, or the taxpayer presents their value, I don't have any opportunity in their 5 minutes to cross-examine them, say, no, I think what you did on page 1 is wrong. Look, I found a mistake over here. Your math is wrong over here. Explain why you did this. That's cross-examination. Well, that's allowed in Oregon Tax Court. They can cross-examine, they can ask me about my appraisal. I give my testimony, I work through my appraisal, and then they get to stand up, and I'm still under oath, and I have to answer all their questions. And then there's also what's called rebuttal, and that's allowed if the person believes that's worthwhile. So for instance, if I give testimony and then I get cross-examined, when that's over, I could do rebuttal. I could go back on the stand and tell the court, maybe explain more about what was meant, or how I got about maybe what my answer, how I came up with my answer on cross-examination. I don't get that when I'm under cross-examination. I'm just answering yes, no, that kind of stuff. But with rebuttal, I get to actually explain my position a little bit better. So it gets real thorough going over, and the judges are real. They're nice, they're polite, and it's very informal. Attorneys are not required at
I was going to ask, yeah.
Now, so a taxpayer, if they're not bashful about standing up and reading off telling their story, they can do it. If they want to hire an attorney, they can. The assessor's office, at least my office, as long as I've been there, we've never had a county counsel or an attorney go in and represent us. We just do it ourselves. We're comfortable with it, and we know the process. It's not scary. And it used to be before COVID, it was pretty usual to have to drive to Salem and do the hearing in Salem in their courtroom. But anymore, they're just as happy to do it over the phone. They would rather not show up in there. In fact, I had one magistrate that I was pretty friends with and good friends with. And he told me one time, he says, you know, Dave, there was 5 magistrates. He was one of 5. He says, you know what? The other magistrates, even when they're doing a phone hearing, they put on their black robe. He goes, I can't, I can't understand why they do that. He says, I just wear what I want, just whatever. But I
Oh,
thought
that's so funny.
it is very informal, and you can make your own motions to do this. Make a motion to dismiss. Make a motion for discovery of information. And if you make the wrong motion, the judge will say, "Well, you know what? I think you really are asking for this kind of a motion. Maybe a
Oh,
motion.
that's nice.
I think you really want a motion for summary judgment. Let's go with that."
So they try to help.
Yes, they can be very helpful. They don't try to guide them, but they can. They have to have they want to enter this into their system, a motion, and they want to give it a name that's meaningful to them. So
Mhm.
when they looking through the list of motions, it'll make sense to
Mhm.
them.
So how
And
long do those magistrate typically take up in the Oregon tax court? Like how long should a property owner plan on being there?
honestly, if they're not having any witnesses, if it's not a really complex, if it's a homeowner, they can plan on taking about as long as it takes to submit their 3 comps and explain a little bit about each of the 3 and the analysis. And if they've got it written out, they should have it written out so they can, when they're in the stand, they don't forget anything. They can just go to page 1, page 2, and tell the judge, okay, on page 3, this is what I'm saying. On page 4, this is what I'm saying. You got to get the verbal, the testimony. The verbal part's very important. That has to.
Oh, that's good to know.
When I first started, I thought I could just hand in a report and the judge would read it and say, well, Dave wins. Well, the judge, they're not going to read it. They want the testimony. They want me to walk them through the document and tell them what I'm showing them.
Interesting.
Yeah. So testimony is really important. And I think most hearings, the assessor can get through their appraisal in half an hour, and the other side can get through in a half an hour. It gets more complex if you want to bring in witnesses, maybe hire an appraiser and let the appraiser come in with a 100-page document and walk the judge through that.
So what other witnesses might there be in Oregon tax court? Is it just usually appraisers or are there other?
No, it could be other, maybe someone can't get a well. They say, I can't get a well. Well, it'd be nice if they had a well digger show up and say, yes, Your Honor, I looked at this guy's property for him, or this lady's property, and in my estimation, it'd be not a good use of their money to search for water. I just don't believe they'll find it, or they might believe they can't get a certain septic system or any septic system in, or maybe they have wetland issues or they have contamination.
Oh,
So if they
okay.
can bring in a witness that will verify or back up what they're saying, that's very helpful. To stand in front of a judge and say, this, I've got wetland and I can't do anything with it. It's not allowed. I've got contamination. The DEQ won't let me do anything. Well, that's kind of hearsay. They're telling the judge what somebody else told them. The judge would rather not hear it through hearsay. They would rather hear it from, the horse.
Yeah, facts, just the facts.
Yeah.
So, Dave, we're almost out of time. Thank you so much for being with us. Dave Arrasmith, Jackson County Assessor. We'll look forward to seeing you again next year.
Okay, bye.
Folks, that's all we have for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. We appreciate our sponsors, John L. Scott, Ashland and Medford, Rogue Valley Association of Realtors, and Guy Giles Mutual Mortgage. They helped us bring this show to the airways each and every week, and we're very, very grateful. We'll see you again next week, same station. Have a beautiful Southern Oregon weekend. Bye, folks.